It feels like kids today are growing up in a world that's just constantly demanding their attention
Right.
from every direction.
It really does. And it makes you wonder.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of us are wondering, why are so many kids struggling to focus, getting overwhelmed so easily, having these like huge emotional reactions?
It's a really common concern. I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of stimulation they face daily is just, it's unprecedented.
Totally. And that's why today we're doing a deep dive into something absolutely fundamental, self-regulation,
Mm-hmm.
which is, way more than just kids behaving well. It's sort of the bedrock for how we navigate everything in life.
That's a great way to put it. It's like the internal toolkit,
Mhm.
right? The one that lets us manage emotions, direct our focus, um, choose how we respond instead of just reacting.
Okay, so for this deep dive, we've really been digging into issue #1, understanding self-regulation from your therapy source. And honestly, it's packed with some really, really eye-opening science about how this all works.
Oh, it's a fantastic resource. It really lays out the science beautifully.
Yeah.
Not just, defining self-regulation, but why it's so critical.
Right.
And it gets into the nitty-gritty of the brain, the nervous system, how it all connects, and importantly, how all the sensory stuff kids are constantly dealing with actually shapes this skill.
So our plan today is to kind of pull out the most interesting bits for you. We want to give you a real feel for the mechanics behind self-regulation, why it matters, and, ultimately how we can start thinking about helping kids really thrive in this, well, intense world.
Absolutely, because when you get what's actually going on in the brain, it makes you so much more effective in supporting kids' growth in this area.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive in then. So when we talk about self-regulation, like in action,
Yeah.
what does that actually look like day to day?
Okay, good question. Think about a simple example. A kid's building a block tower, right? And crash, it falls down.
Oh yeah, disaster looms.
Right. Now, a child with pretty good self-regulation, they'll feel that disappointment, maybe a flash of anger, sure. But instead of, instantly kicking the rest of the blocks or having a total meltdown.
Applause.
Exactly.
Right.
They might pause, maybe take a breath, and then they might try again, maybe build it differently.
That pause, that little gap between the feeling and the reaction, that's the magic, isn't
That's
it?
the core of it.
Yeah.
But it's not magic, right? It doesn't just appear.
No, definitely not.
It's a skill.
Well,
It grows over time, and it needs practice, and it needs support from the adults around them. It's like learning anything new really takes effort. There are bumps.
And it sounds like today's world just throws in extra hurdles, that your therapy source issue really drove home how this constant sensory flood can make developing self-regulation way tougher.
Oh, absolutely. Just think about it. The nonstop notifications, the speed everything moves at, the visual intensity on screens.
Yeah.
It can just overload a developing brain. It makes it harder for them to learn how to filter things out, manage those emotional surges, stay focused.
Which kind of loops back to why we might be seeing more kids struggling with anxiety or being impulsive or just having those really big, overwhelming feelings.
Precisely. And that's why building these skills early isn't just about getting through childhood smoothly. It's really laying a critical foundation for their whole life, for mental health, emotional well-being, resilience.
Okay, so we get what it is, but why is it such a big deal? Your therapy source material calls it a cornerstone of lifelong success. I mean, that's a pretty bold claim.
It is bold, but when you look at the evidence, it holds up. Self-regulation really underpins so many vital parts of a successful, fulfilling life. Take learning, for instance.
Right? Like focusing in class.
Exactly. Focusing, sticking with a tough problem even when it's frustrating, being able to shift your thinking when you get new information.
Yeah.
All of that depends heavily on self-regulation.
And the issue highlights some research, right? Showing that even preschoolers with stronger self-regulation skills tend to do better later on in reading and math.
That's right. There are studies showing those early skills are really predictive of later academic achievement. And other research has found links between better attention control early on and things like, higher graduation rates later.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
compelling. What about outside of school? How does it connect to just like overall health, physical, mental?
Well, think about daily choices. Self-regulation affects our ability to choose healthier foods, to motivate ourselves to exercise, even to stick to a decent sleep schedule.
Right, resisting the urge for that extra cookie or dragging yourself out for a walk.
Exactly. And research does suggest people with stronger self-regulation tend to have fewer unhealthy habits. Plus, on the mental side, managing your emotions effectively. That's huge for psychological resilience. It helps you navigate stress, bounce back from tough times,
It all seems so connected. If you can manage impulses, maybe it's easier to stick to those healthy routines.
Precisely. And then there's the whole social piece. How does self-regulation help kids navigate, the tricky world of friendships and social stuff?
This must be where that pause and think ability really shines, right? Like instead of yelling at a friend during an argument,
Hmm.
a kid with better self-regulation might actually stop, try to figure out what the other kid is feeling, and find a better way to sort it out.
Exactly that. It fosters empathy. It helps them see things from someone else's perspective. Kids who can manage those impulses are just much better equipped to build good relationships and avoid the kind of social problems that come from, acting out or having big emotional outbursts. Research backs this up. It's key for social competence.
So it's not just about staying out of trouble, it's actually about building positive connections. And this isn't just for little kids, right? The issue says it gets even more important as they get older.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Think about teenagers, young adults.
Yep.
Life gets way more complex. You're juggling school, maybe a job, relationships, making big decisions. Self-regulation becomes absolutely essential for setting goals and actually sticking to them, managing all those competing demands, adapting when things inevitably go wrong. Those skills they build in childhood, that's the framework they use to handle all that later complexity.
It really does feel like it touches almost every part of life. Okay, so we get what it is, why it's crucial. Now for the really cool part, the science, the brain. What's
Yeah.
actually going on in there?
Right. So the main engine driving self-regulation is what we call executive functioning. These are higher-level cognitive skills planning, focusing attention, remembering instructions, juggling tasks.
Okay.
And the star player here is the prefrontal cortex. It's that part of the brain right behind your forehead. Think of it as the brain's CEO or command center.
Yeah, your therapy source material calls it the manager, which I like.
Hmm.
It helps kids plan, adjust, respond thoughtfully instead of just bang, reacting.
Precisely. And to really get it, it helps to kind of zoom in on some specific brain areas and systems involved. The issue has this great section, key terms to know. Shall we walk through a few of the big ones?
Definitely. Let's start with one that people hear a lot about, the amygdala, the emotional center.
That's right. The amygdala is crucial for processing emotions, especially fear and threat detection. It's basically the brain's alarm system. It fires up the body's stress response.
Okay.
So when a child sees something as scary or emotionally intense, the amygdala gets activated. Now, here's something interesting to think about, especially today. Could that constant stream of notifications, rapid information, could that be kind of inadvertently pinging the amygdala more often?
Huh. Like keeping kids in a low-level state of alert?
Potentially.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder if their emotional alarm is just getting nudged constantly.
Interesting. Okay, what about the basal ganglia? What's their job?
The basal ganglia are deep brain structures involved in controlling movement, but also forming habits and, critically for self-regulation, regulating impulses. They help us start and stop actions smoothly. Think of them as helping apply the brakes on impulsive urges.
Habits and impulses.
Okay.
That makes sense. What about the default mode network? That sounds different.
Yeah, DMN. It's a network of regions that gets active when we're not focused on the outside world. When your mind wanders, you're daydreaming, reflecting on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's linked to self-reflection, processing emotions, creativity. Now, here's a thought. With kids having less and less unstructured downtime, just quiet time, are we maybe shortchanging the development of this network, affecting their self-awareness?
Wow. So
Yeah.
doing nothing is actually doing something important in the brain.
Okay, another key term.
Yep.
Effortful control. How's that different?
Effort control is more conscious. It's the ability to deliberately suppress that immediate impulse in favor of a more considered goal-oriented response. This is where the prefrontal cortex steps up to kind of override or modulate the amygdala signals.
So the amygdala shouts, do it now, and effortful control says, hang on, let's think about this.
Exactly. It's that internal governor choosing the wiser path.
Got it. And the hippocampus. Memory, right. How does that fit in? Yeah, the hippocampus is vital for forming new memories and linking them to what we already know. For self-regulation, it helps us use past experiences to understand the present and guide our reactions. It works with the amygdala to add context. Like, a positive past experience can dampen an anxious reaction now.
Okay, so it's like the brain's library, helping interpret the now based on the before. What about the hypothalamus?
Tiny but mighty. The hypothalamus regulates essential body functions, hunger, sleep, and, importantly, the stress response. It triggers the release of hormones like cortisol when we feel threatened. So amygdala, senses danger, signals the hypothalamus, and boom, you feel those physical stress symptoms.
Right, that mind-body link in stress. And that brings us to the limbic system, which includes some of these guys.
Exactly. The limbic system is the broader network, includes the amygdala, hippocampus, and other structures working together on emotions, memory, and stress. It's the core emotional processing circuit.
It's also connected. Okay, mirror neurons, these sound fascinating. What's their deal?
They're pretty amazing. Mirror neurons fire both when we do an action and when we see someone else do that same action.
Yeah.
They're thought to be fundamental for empathy, learning by watching. They let us kind of mentally simulate or mirror others' actions and feelings.
Wow, so watching someone helps us understand them on a neural level.
That's the idea. Think about a baby learning to smile by seeing smiles.
Yeah.
That's likely mirror neurons at work.
Incredible. Okay, the parietal lobe.
The parietal lobe processes sensory information, touch, temperature, where you are in space. It works closely with the prefrontal cortex to help focus attention by integrating all that incoming sensory data and filtering out what's not relevant right now.
Teamwork makes the dream work in the brain. Okay, shifting gears slightly to the nervous system, we've got the parasympathetic and sympathetic systems in the key terms.
Right, the two main branches of our autonomic nervous system, the stuff that happens automatically. The sympathetic system is the gas pedal, fight or flight. It ramps things up, increases heart rate, alertness, ready for action.
And the parasympathetic.
That's the brake pedal, rest and digest. It calms things down, slows the heart rate, aids digestion, promotes relaxation.
So it's like this internal balance beam. You need both, but for self-regulation, you need the parasympathetic system to be able to kick in effectively.
Exactly. If you're constantly overstimulated, the sympathetic system can get stuck on making it really hard for the parasympathetic system to bring you back to calm. Kids can feel constantly wired.
That makes total sense. Okay, the reticular activating system, the RAS.
The RAS is like the brain's gatekeeper or filter located in the brainstem. It helps regulate alertness and decides which sensory information is important enough to pass through to our conscious awareness, filtering out background noise.
Like a bouncer for sensory input, deciding what gets in. And the last two here, the thalamus and the vagus nerve.
The thalamus is like Grand Central Station for sensory info. It receives input from the senses and directs it to the right parts of the cortex for processing.
The main relay.
And the vagus nerve is a huge nerve connecting the brainstem to major organs throughout the body. It's a primary activator of the parasympathetic nervous system, crucial for calming the body after stress. A key brain-body communication line for regulation.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of moving parts. It really is like
Yeah.
an orchestra in there, all working together.
It truly is complex, and understanding these pieces really deepens our appreciation for what self-regulation involves. The Your Therapy Source issue then helpfully groups this into three key components: executive functioning, effortful control, and emotional regulation. Each draws on these brain areas we just discussed.
Right. Let's break those down a bit more. Executive function, the manager. What specific skills are under that heading?
So executive functions, mainly run by the prefrontal cortex, include a few core things: attention control, focusing, resisting distractions, that's prefrontal cortex, working with the parietal lobe.
Okay.
Inhibitory control, stopping yourself from acting impulsively, thinking first, that involves the prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia.
Yeah, hitting the brakes.
Exactly. And working memory, holding information in your mind and manipulating it, like remembering instructions while doing something that's prefrontal cortex connecting with the hippocampus.
Focus, brakes, mental sticky notes. Got it. All crucial for getting through the day. What about effortful control again, specifically?
Right. So effortful control is that conscious choice, choosing the harder, goal-directed path over the easy, immediate impulse. It's that balancing act between the prefrontal cortex wanting the long-term goal and the amygdala wanting immediate gratification. And interestingly, research mentioned in the issue suggests supportive, consistent caregiving actually helps strengthen those connections between the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, building that effortful control capacity.
So it's not just innate, it's really nurtured by early relationships. Makes sense. And the third piece, emotional regulation.
This one is deeply tied to the limbic system, especially the amygdala, but also the vagus nerve and the sympathetic parasympathetic systems. A stressful event triggers the amygdala, maybe kicks off the sympathetic fight or flight. Emotional regulation involves the prefrontal cortex stepping in and the vagus nerve helping to activate the parasympathetic system to calm things down, manage the intensity. And crucially, co-regulation is key here.
That's when caregivers help kids manage.
Yeah, modeling calm, helping kids label and understand their feelings. It's like they learn to surf those emotional waves with our help, building their own skills over time.
That makes so much sense. They learn from watching us and getting support.
Yeah.
But your therapy source issue also talks about how this develops over time, right? Different stages.
Yes, it emphasizes how incredibly fast brains develop in early childhood, how plastic they are. Things like consistent routines, lots of play-based learning, and those nurturing relationships are absolutely foundational now.
Building the base.
Exactly. Then, as kids hit adolescence, they need more autonomy, but self-regulation gets more complex, long-term goals, abstract thinking. So we need to provide scaffolding support that gradually fades as they become more independent.
But it also flags things that can disrupt this, like adverse childhood experiences or just this chronic overstimulation we keep talking about.
That's a critical point. ACEs can literally disrupt the development of key brain areas for self-regulation. And that constant sensory overload can just overwhelm the system, making it way harder to find that calm, focused state needed for regulation and learning. We really need environments sensitive to where kids are developmentally.
Absolutely. Which leads perfectly to another powerful line from your therapy source material. You have to regulate before you can educate. That really hits home.
It's fundamental. Before a child can focus on learning algebra or even just listen effectively to a story, their nervous system needs to be in a reasonably calm, regulated state, not on high alert, not totally shut down.
Right.
And sensory processing, how we take in, make sense of, and respond to sensory input, is the gateway to that regulated state. If a child struggles with processing sensory stuff, maybe they're super sensitive to noise or touch, that can trigger stress responses constantly, making self-regulation and learning incredibly difficult.
But if their sensory system is freaking out, it's going to be almost impossible for the prefrontal cortex, the manager, to do its job.
Precisely. And thinking back to those nervous system branches, sympathetic gas and parasympathetic
Yeah.
brake. In a constantly stimulating world, that sympathetic system can just get stuck in overdrive.
Yeah.
It makes it really hard for the parasympathetic system to step in and apply the brakes,
Yeah.
bring the body back to balance.
So kids can end up kind of chronically wired, making self-regulation feel like a constant uphill battle.
Yeah.
Okay, so the issue then walks us through the actual sensory processing pathway in the brain, right? How information flows.
Yes, it traces the journey. It starts with the thalamus and the reticular activating system, RAS, the initial filters. They decide what sensory info gets our attention and what gets tuned out.
Okay, the gatekeepers.
Right. So think about a busy classroom, lights buzzing, kids shuffling, outside noise. If a child's RAS isn't filtering effectively, all that input can be overwhelming, making it impossible to focus on the teacher.
We talked about the RAS earlier. If it's underdeveloped or too sensitive, even something like a fan hum can be a huge distraction.
Exactly. And the issue points out potential links here with conditions like ADHD, where attention is a challenge, and autism, where sensory processing differences are really common. It makes you think, how are our environments impacting this filtering process?
Yeah, are we setting them up for sensory overload? Okay, after the filters, where does the signal go?
Next stop, the amygdala. That emotional alarm bell. It quickly scans the input. Is this a threat? If so, it triggers an emotional response. So imagine a child who's very sensitive to loud sounds. A sudden door slam might trigger a huge fear response in their amygdala, leading to a big reaction that's hard to recover from.
And we know that overstimulation can make the amygdala hyperreactive, even to small things.
It's exactly. The issue mentions potential links again, ADHD with emotional regulation difficulties, autism with hypersensitivity leading to anxiety, and also other anxiety disorders, PTSD. It highlights how important predictable, safe-feeling environments are and teaching kids calming strategies for when that alarm goes off.
Those false alarms can really derail things. What's next after the amygdala?
Information heads to the hippocampus, the memory center. It pulls up related past experiences to give context. Is this situation familiar? Was it safe last time?
Ah, so positive memories can help calm the amygdala's reaction.
Potentially, yes. It provides that context. But if sensory input is overwhelming, it might interfere with forming clear, positive memories, which can make new situations feel more anxious later.
Okay.
The issue notes potential links to ADHD regarding retrieving context and autism regarding structural differences affecting memory and social cues. It really shows the value of routines and creating positive experiences to build that library of reassuring memories.
Routines as anchors.
I got it.
Then the hypothalamus.
Right, the stress hormone control center. When a threat is perceived, the hypothalamus gets the signal and releases hormones like cortisol, prepping the body for fight, flight, or freeze. Chronic overload means frequent activation, potentially leading to ongoing tension, fatigue,
And the issue connects this to ADHD, more frequent alarms,
Uh-huh.
autism, sensory triggers for fight, flight, freeze, and anxiety disorders, too. It really drives home that physical side of sensory processing.
It does. It reminds us to watch for physical signs of stress and help kids regulate their bodies. Okay, next up is the big boss, the prefrontal cortex.
The thinking center, impulse control, decision making.
Exactly. And remember, it's still developing through childhood and even adolescence. So it's quite vulnerable to being overwhelmed by constant stimulation. That makes it harder for kids to pause, think things through, and choose a response instead of just reacting. The issue discusses links to ADHD, different activity patterns, impulsivity, autism, challenges with flexible thinking, and also ODD conduct disorder, impaired cognitive control. It really stresses why practicing those executive function skills is so vital.
Practicing the pause, building those thinking muscles. Okay, what about the basal ganglia and cerebellum in this sensory context?
They handle motor planning, coordination, balance. They contribute to feeling physically grounded. The issue suggests that maybe less physical play, more screen time, could impact the development of these areas.
Interesting. Less movement means less development of that physical regulation.
Potentially. It links this to ADHD. Coordination issues, hyperactivity sometimes seen as seeking stimulation, autism, motor planning challenges, repetitive movements, and developmental coordination disorder. It's a great reminder of how crucial active physical play is.
Get kids moving. Okay, then we have the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system.
The calming crew. They bring us back to baseline after stress. And the issue points out that chronic overstimulation can actually make it harder for the system to kick in effectively. It mentions possible links to ADHD, lower vagal tone, harder to calm down, and autism, maybe less responsive, longer recovery after stress. This really highlights why we need to explicitly teach things like deep breathing, mindfulness, ways to actively engage that calming system.
Giving kids tools to activate their own brakes makes sense. Nearly there. Mirror neurons in the sensory pathway.
Yeah, back to empathy and social understanding, they help us resonate with others. The issue raises a question. With less face-to-face interaction and more screen time, are we potentially limiting the activation and development of these crucial social neurons?
Less practice reading real-time cues.
Possibly. It mentions links to ADHD, social awareness, autism, processing social cues, empathy, and conduct disorder. It really underscores the value of those rich, real-world social interactions.
Makes you want to prioritize playdates. Okay, last stop. The default mode network.
The DMN, active during rest, reflection, crucial for self-awareness, creativity. And the point here is that constant external stimulation leaves less time and space for the DMN to do its thing. The issue notes potential links to ADHD, DMN activating inappropriately, internal distraction, autism, differences impacting social imagination, self-reflection, and even depression, overactive DMN with negative focus. It's a strong argument for protecting unstructured downtime for kids.
Time to just be. Wow. It's incredible seeing it all laid out like that, these 9 key areas, how interconnected they are and how our environment plays such a huge role. Your therapy source issue does such a good job mapping this out.
It really does.
Right.
And importantly, it doesn't just leave you with the science. It follows up with practical tips, creating calmer environments, encouraging movement, modeling emotional regulation, fostering social time, protecting rest.
Actionable things we can actually do. It really hammers home that understanding the why, the brain science, helps us figure out the how to effectively support kids.
Absolutely. It shifts the focus from just managing behavior to actually supporting the underlying brain development needed for self-regulation.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful, a true deep dive into the science, and huge thanks to issue #1, Understanding Self-Regulation from your therapy source, for providing such a clear and comprehensive foundation.
It's a fantastic resource, honestly. Breaks down really complex stuff in a way that's easy to grasp.
And for you listening, if you want to go even deeper, get more details, access more resources, you can actually purchase issue #1, The Science of Self-Regulation, directly from your therapysource.com. We definitely recommend checking it out.
Yeah, it's invaluable for parents, educators, therapists, anyone working with kids and wanting to support their development.
And looking ahead, our next deep dive is going to build right on this. We'll be tackling self-regulation in a busy world.
Ooh, important one.
Yeah, we'll get into things like screen time specifically, practical ways to find balance in modern life, and how to build that emotional resilience kids need today.
That sounds like a perfect follow-up. Really practical stuff.
Definitely. So as we wrap up today, maybe the thought to leave you with is this. The more we understand the science behind self-regulation, the better equipped we are to give the kids in our lives those foundational skills, skills they absolutely need to navigate this complex world and build, happier, more successful futures. Thanks so much for joining us on the deep dive.